Hello, welcome back, and what a few months it's been. This summer we've seen multiple next-generation Amtrak trains, one being delivered and one entering service, an unprecedented Class 1 railroad merger, countless historic locomotives being preserved, a new Amtrak route, and much more, coming up now on Railroad Quarterly. First off, on the afternoon of May 30th, a sinkhole was discovered near the Amtrak Post Road branch, a 12-mile single-track line between Albany and Schodack, New York, used by the Boston segment of the Lakeshore Limited and the Berkshire Flyer to connect to CSX territory. It was soon discovered that this sinkhole had the potential to swallow up part of the Post Road branch, so all trains using this line were promptly cancelled and replaced with buses for the entire summer. Repairs are in progress and service is expected to be restored in early 2026. A few days into June, on the 4th, Norfolk Southern surprise dropped a brand new heritage unit, this time celebrating the Delaware and Hudson Railroad. Around this time last year, NS held a public vote to determine what the 21st locomotive in their heritage program should be, and despite the D&H appearing to be the clear winner, the Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia was chosen. More than 6 months after 4851, the tag unit was unveiled, NS SD70 ACE number 1080 appeared in a fresh coat of the Delaware and Hudson's Lightning Bolt livery. 3 days later, Chesapeake and Ohio 614, a 484 built by the Lima Locomotive Works in 1948, departed its resting place in Clifton Forge, Virginia for Strasburg, Pennsylvania, where it will be restored to operating condition for RJD America, a private rail preservation group. On the 11th, the newest addition to Amtrak's fleet quietly entered service on the Empire Corridor when P42C number 9700 began leading revenue trains. 9700 is one of 18 P42 diesels being converted to non-powered control units, allowing for easy turnarounds at the end of the line. Unlike their F40 counterparts, however, the P42Cs are not as tall, allowing them to make the lower clearances along the Empire Corridor. It's expected that most of these units will serve on routes based out of Albany, New York, like the Empire Service, Maple Leaf, and Ethan Allen Express. However, routes like the Hartford Line, Downeaster, and even the Mardi Gras, which I'll talk about later in this video, may also see these units. 2 days later, Metro North released its 7th and likely final heritage unit, with P32 ACDM number 230 receiving the MTA Central scheme applied to the FL9s in the late 70s. Unlike the previous 6, 203 is painted rather than wrapped and will likely stick around much longer than the rest, although all P32s are expected to be replaced in the next few years with Siemens Chargers. Kind of weird how all these commuter rails in the Northeast are turning engines with less than a decade left of service into heritage units. Definitely catch them while you can. On the 16th, less than a year after service began, CalTrain shut down part of its newly electrified line, but don't worry, it's just temporary. Due to construction on the Guadalupe River Bridge in San Jose, California, electrified service was replaced with a bus between Diridon and Tamian stations, a less than 2-mile stretch at the end of the line. Not really a big deal, but the real reason I mentioned CalTrain is to say that in its first year of electric service, ridership has increased approximately 75%, which in my opinion is undeniable proof that more frequent, faster electric service is not only a benefit to the environment, but even more so the communities it serves. Later that week, the Wheeling and Lake Erie renumbered and repainted SD40-2 number 6376 to SD40-2 number 1776 to celebrate the upcoming 250th anniversary of American independence next year. 4 days later, New York's MTA ordered a total of 316 new railcars both for the Metro North Railroad and the Long Island Railroad. Dubbed the M9As, these Alstom-built electric multiple units will replace 40-year-old M3 and M3A cars, and based on renderings will look pretty similar to M7 and M7A cars. The first cars are expected to be delivered in 2029, with the rest being delivered through 2032. These cars, in addition to the new Siemens Charger locomotives ordered at the beginning of the year, will bring a completely new look to the Long Island Railroad and will continue Metro North's modernization efforts. Following Norfolk Southern's Delaware and Hudson Heritage Unit, Genesee Valley Transportation completed Delaware Lackawanna RS-3 number 4068, which was restored to its former D&H paint. Lots of love for the D&H this month. On the 24th, New Jersey Transit broke ground on its Raritan River Bridge replacement project, where this 117-year-old swing bridge will be replaced with a brand new lift bridge, decreasing bridge-related delays on the North Jersey coastline. On July 2nd, the Illinois Railway Museum received 2 former Amtrak diesels from the Nevada State Railroad Museum, one recently restored and one in pretty rough shape. First up is Amtrak 231, an F40PHR recently repainted back to the classic Phase 3 livery, but with the twist, a true-to-era Operation Lifesaver graphic on the nose. Next up is BNSF 6976, an SDF40-2 that began life as an Amtrak SDP40F, and wore quite a few paint schemes throughout its life. Despite it being the only remaining SDP40F in existence, both started life this way, as all Amtrak F40PHRs were built from scrapped SDP40F parts. At any rate, it would be awesome to see 6976 restored back to the SDP40F spec and repainted back to the Amtrak Phase 1 livery. A week later, Union Pacific released a video of its ZTR hybrid locomotives testing in yard service. This duo, consisting of one diesel and one battery locomotive, works similar to a yard slug set but uses 80% less fuel. Ever notice how when Class 1 railroads talk about any low emissions or zero emissions equipment, they rarely talk about how it's lower emissions, but instead talk about the decreased fuel burn? Not that using less fuel is a bad thing, but it's just an interesting language choice that's very telling of Union Pacific's priorities here. Also, remember when UP ordered 20 mainline battery electric locomotives in 2022 and touted it as the largest investment made by a railroad in such technology? Well, both of these 10-unit orders were quietly cancelled, and it's almost like they never intended to buy them at all. If you watched any of my videos before, you'll know that I'm not very fond of battery electric locomotives at all. They give the illusion of electrification, while not being anywhere close to as efficient as the real thing. That being said, it's not like UP was planning to put up wires either. 2 days later, back in Scranton, Pennsylvania, another former Delaware and Hudson ALCO was brought back to life when PA4 nickel plate 190 became the first ALCO PA to run in the U.S. in more than 50 years. 190 began life as an ALCO PA4 on the Delaware and Hudson before being sold to the Santa Fe and later ending up in a railroad museum in Mexico. After being bought by rail preservationist Doyle McCormick and painted into his childhood favorite railroad's paint, 190 returned to its home in Scranton, where it will remain for the foreseeable future. On the 16th, the U.S. Department of Transportation pulled $4 billion in funding for California high-speed rail, which the Trump administration has deemed a money pit. California Governor Gavin Newsom vows to fight these cuts, but for now construction continues. Just look at this White House press release though. We're living in one big episode of South Park. Back to the good news. On July 22nd, the first Amtrak intercity train built by Siemens Mobility departed the factory near Sacramento, California for testing at the MXV Rail Complex in Pueblo, Colorado. This Aero train set, which is the first of 8 to be used on the Cascades route, should be entering service next year. These trains will replace older equipment with newer, more spacious and modern interiors, more efficient locomotives, and include cab cars for easy turnarounds. Expect a second train set being delivered to Amtrak for testing on its own rails in the coming months. On July 30th, a few weeks after merger rumors began to circulate, Union Pacific confirmed it's moving forward to purchase Norfolk Southern, hiring advisors for an $85 billion deal that would expand UP's network east of the Mississippi. This comes as CSX and BNSF have also been in talks with merger advisors, though BNSF says it's not interested in merging, at least for now. Union Pacific's timing here is clearly strategic, taking advantage of a very pro-free market administration, but the deal is still subject to the approval of the Surface Transportation Board. If approved, this would be a huge blow to the already low competition American freight rail market, but luckily the STB previously stated that the 2022 CPKC merger would be the last Class 1 merger they'd allow, but that definitely could change. In my opinion, if UP and NS merge, a BNSF-CSX deal, or something similar would likely follow, cutting the Big Four down to just 2, a number which is already concerningly low. American freight rail may be moving towards monopoly, but hey, at least an SD70 Mac is being preserved. On the 31st, the Illinois Railway Museum announced that they had acquired BNSF 9400, the first SD70 Mac ever built, and the first mainline freight locomotive with alternating traction operated in the United States. 9400, which currently wears BNSF paint, is planned to be restored to the Burlington Northern Executive paint scheme it was delivered in, and will join IRM's diesel fleet. The next day, on August 1st, the next addition to Amtrak's new Phase 7 fleet arrived, with Metroliner cab car number 9635 emerging in a Phase 7 paint job reminiscent of the original Amtrak paint applied to the Metroliners. Despite the fact that the Metroliners are planned to be retired in the next few years with the arrival of Aero train sets and HHP-8C control units, it seems that Amtrak is moving forward with adapting these 50-plus-year-old cars to the current look. On the 5th, it was announced that Minneapolis's Northstar commuter rail would be shutting down due to low ridership and increased operating costs. This service, which currently runs 7 weekday round trips, will be replaced with the more frequent bus service and will officially cease operations on January 4th, 2026, after the final Vikings home game. On the same day, Norfolk Southern, hot on the heels of releasing the Delaware and Hudson Heritage Unit, unveiled a freshly repainted Illinois Terminal locomotive, which had just undergone heavy mechanical repairs in Altoona, Pennsylvania. 1072 is the 5th of 20 to be restored by NS, which has slowly been overhauling and repainting each of its heritage units since 2023, in addition to adding 2 brand new ones. 10 days later, on the 15th, the first of 6 Rolling Stock Solutions lease locomotives arrived in Massachusetts for their first customer, the MBTA commuter rail. RSTX 1002 is an F40PH-4C, which is a heavily overhauled ex-Amtrak F40. Unlike an Amtrak F40, however, 1002 has a separate Tier 4 head-end power generator and modern electronics. 1002 will eventually be joined by units 1001 through 1006 and will likely enter service in the coming months. 3 days later, at long last, Amtrak inaugurated its new route in the Gulf Coast. The new Mardi Gras service runs 2 daily round trips between New Orleans, Louisiana and Mobile, Alabama, and restores service east of New Orleans for the first time since 2005 when the Sunset Limited was truncated. Nice to see that Amtrak is on a streak creating new routes as of late. Hopefully the Mardi Gras will see the same success that the Borealis and seasonal Berkshire Flyer have. Staying in the southeast, on the same day, Orlando's SunRail revealed an entire train with the 250th anniversary wrap, once again celebrating 250 years of America. MP32PH-Q number 110, along with the 2-car set, stands out from the ordinary SunRail trains with a colorful red, white, and blue livery. Finally, on the 18th, Mid-America Car of Kansas City showed photos of one of their recent undertakings, converting a BNSF SD70 Mac to a snowplow. BNSF 9528, now 95280, was retrofitted with a massive plow up front, as well as a yellow BNSF maintenance of way paint scheme. Unlike the similar CSX SD70 Mac that was converted to a first responders training unit, this BNSF engine may still be self-propelled, in which case it'll be quite the sight to see when it enters service in the future. On the 21st, the Lake State Railway, a short-line freight railroad in Michigan, released photos of its new Spirit of Pere Marquette locomotive, a recently acquired ex-Union Pacific SD70M, painted in the scheme of the LSR's predecessor. On the same day, after more than a year of on and off testing, the first new coaster cab car entered service. NCTC 423 is the first of 3 new crash energy management cab cars built by Alstom, which are not only more modern, but safer for the engineer and occupants due to their extended front ends. The next day, the Great Plains Transportation Museum in Wichita, Kansas, announced that it would be sending Santa Fe FP45 number 93 to Mid-America Car, which we were just talking about, to be cosmetically restored and given a fresh coat of the classic Santa Fe Superfleet War Bonnet paint scheme. On the 25th, the MBTA, which just recently eliminated rapid transit slow zones system-wide, increased top speeds on the Orange Line from 40 to 55 miles per hour between Oak Grove and Assembly. In the last few years, the MBTA has done a great job of recovering from what some could consider an all-time low for service, not only back to normal, but above and beyond. Well done. Finally, in what's probably the most anticipated news of the last few years, Amtrak's NextGen Acela trains entered service on the Northeast Corridor after countless years of delays. The outgoing trains, which were built more than 25 years ago, are finally being replaced with all-new trains built by Alstom. Now obviously, the second generation Acelas are more efficient, a little faster, and have more inviting interiors, but what I see as their most underrated advantage is their increased capacity, with more than 25% more seats than outgoing models, and the ability to add cars with their modular train design. What's more is that 28 train sets are replacing the original 20, allowing for more runs to be added to the schedule. With the new Acelas comes a top speed increase from 150 to 160 miles per hour, but more importantly, these trains are designed to go up to 220 once proper infrastructure upgrades are made. The first few trips experienced some delays due to issues with their door systems, but given the extensive testing that's taken place over the last nearly 5 years, and the fact that it's been almost 9 years since these trains were ordered, hopefully it should be smooth sailing from here. Between now and 2027, the NextGen Acela train sets will slowly be phased into service, allowing for the much-deserved retirement of the original Acelas.